Hello and welcome to this webinar on reward and recognition in safety. And by the looks of the amount of people who have signed up, registered, and are currently attending this webinar, this is a real topic of interest for a number of people. I'm your presenter today, Anthony Gibbs, and I'm the CEO of Centus. I've been here for quite some time, and I was drawn to Centus by its mission to change the lives of individuals and organisations for the better every day. We do that through the application of psychology and neuroscience to improve safety cultures. So if you're looking for safety culture assessments, leadership development, or team development, give us a yell. As we work through this webinar, we'll be using GoToWebinars. There's a control panel potentially up on your screen that you can use. Just a quick walkthrough of how to use the control panel. The orange arrow at the top enables you to expand or collapse the control panel. All participants will be muted. However, you can send comments and questions at any time by clicking into the comments section. Just make sure you hit send so we get those questions or comments through, and James will collate those and get those through at the end of the webinar for us to answer. You can also get access to some awesome supporting resources by clicking on the download section there. I encourage you to download those resources. They're very useful to take your own notes on, but also to continue conversations within your organization. Of course, the webinar and all the associated resources will be sent out to you in an email post the webinar, so you can watch it back at your own leisure, should you choose to do so. As I mentioned, feel free to add questions into the questions section as we go throughout the day. We do already, though, have some questions. So we've got questions, we've got 4 or 5 questions already sorted out here. So we've got one from Energy Queensland, from Murray. So providing reward and recognition for good safety performance could potentially lead to some negative behaviours, employees not reporting near misses or potential safety hazards for fear that reporting could impact on their safety statistics. How can this be avoided, and what mechanism can we put in place? So great question, and we'll cover that off as we go through the session. I've got another one from John McDonald at Mainbrace Constructions. He said that he's seen a bunch of stuff work well, such as good frameworks for recognition, as well as recognition being completed in a timely fashion, and separating out traditional KPIs. What he'd like to hear more about are the best strategies to destigmatize safety recognition and rewards. And aside from the management being an in-photo opportunity or pushing safety rewards, what are the best tips for being proactive and positive? So we'll cover off on some of that as well. Dana McCannon from HSEC Manager from Corporate Services at HVAC has said that they've really struggled with reward and recognition and safety, and they're keen to hear about some more strategies that have worked well. And David Keating from Horizon has said major companies give leadership awards based on company values. Leadership is often an award, and monthly meetings are a way that they also recognise. So we'll cover off on some of those. And also got Michael Allen here, said it would be great to hear about rewards that don't cost any money, being a government organisation. So we'll be covering off a bunch of these reward and recognition strategies as we go through the session together, but we'll be tackling this challenge in 4 key steps. So firstly, we're going to look at what effective safety leadership looks like and the role that reward and recognition plays in effective safety leadership. We'll tap into some current insights from our own research around safety leadership. We're going to look at some of the current pitfalls, some of the common pitfalls that we can hit when it comes to reward and recognition, and certainly not focusing on the right thing or not having the right KPI set can be one of those. And we're going to give you some tips and tricks as to what good looks like when it comes to reward and recognition. So to launch into this section, we'll firstly have a look at what the role of effective safety leadership in building safety culture and promoting reward recognition. So when Centus seeks to understand safety cultures within organisations, we use a model based on the work of Scotty Geller. And what this model says is that our culture is made up at a high level of 4 key components. People, so that's people's attitudes, beliefs, skills, capabilities, practices, relates to policies, the procedures, the rules, and the guidelines that are in place. The environment, so they're your physical controls. And influencing all of these factors is leadership. Leadership has a huge role to play in impacting on people's attitudes, skills, and beliefs, how policies and procedures are implemented, rolled out, and what role they play, and obviously the environmental controls that come into play. Effective safety leadership is made up of a number of different capabilities. Some are transactional capability skills and some are transformational skills. So from our own literature reviews into safety citizenship, the 4 areas of safety leadership we typically focus on are supporting, recognizing, active care, collaborating, vision, inspiring, role modeling, and challenging. So we've got diagnostic tools which enable us to help leaders and organizations understand which of these particular competencies they're very effective at and which competencies they're not particularly effective at. Of course, what we're focusing on today is the recognizing component of safety leadership. So quick poll just to get people's perceptions of the effectiveness of safety leadership within their business in driving a strong safety or a positive safety culture. So I'll ask James to put the poll up on the screen for me. Thanks, James. So the question is, in your organization, what percentage of leaders do you think demonstrate strong safety leadership? Do you think it's less than 20%, 20 to 40%, 40 to 60%, 60 to 80%, or more than 80%? So what percentage of leaders do you feel demonstrate strong leadership behavior? So I've got some responses coming through now, which is great. All right, we're up to about 73, 74% voted. Give it another 5 seconds. Thanks, James. And we'll close that one out. Okay, so the results are in. So we're about 22% are saying less than 20% are strong safety leaders, 19%, 20 to 40%, 27% believe that about half of your leaders are effective, and then another 21% feel that most of your leaders are effective safety leaders, and then a small percentage believe that more than 80% of your organization are effective safety leaders. Very, very interesting results there, so very evenly spread across all of those sections. So what we'll do is we'll share some of our research into safety leadership, because safety leadership plays such a huge role in how empowered and engaged people feel within the organization, and also how effectively reward and recognition is rolled out and implemented. So the current state of safety leadership from our own research. Our research has tapped into over 8,000 people across 6 industries and a number of different locations. So this is research that spans Africa, Australia, the USA, and global. So there's a number of other countries that have plugged into that global part of the research as well. And what that research has demonstrated, has shown us, is that only about 24% of leaders demonstrate strong safety leadership. So what it's basically saying is that team members who participated in this have indicated that only 1 in 4 leaders they believe are effective safety leaders within their organization. So another quick poll in regards to this. How would you rate your ability, specifically if we're going to narrow down into those competencies, how would you rate your own personal ability to recognize and reward your team for safe behaviors? Do you feel you're poor at it, you're average to fair, or you feel that you're strong? Where do you think you fit? So as polls coming in. Great, so about 77%. We'll give it another 5 seconds there. Thanks, James. Great, and it's all closed out. So 9% said poor, 60% said fair to average, and 31% said strong. So thank you for your feedback there. So what we're going to provide you now is a little bit of context. So as to the general perceptions or belief of capability and reward recognition or recognizing as a skill across safety leaders across those particular areas. So what I'm going to show you in just a moment is the breakdown of those 8 competencies of safety leadership and where rewarding and recognizing sits in those. So if we look at the overall data set, the data tells us that the average upwards perceptions of safety leaders' ability to recognize their team's positive safety behaviours was at 3.99 out of an overall ranking of potentially 6. So what this shows is that overall, the belief was that safety leaders weren't particularly effective at being safety leaders. So we heard that in the 1 to 4, and we can see most people sit within that orange zone. But a particular area of weakness that has been recognized is recognizing. So recognizing is by far the weakest average score across all of those leadership competencies as rated by people's directed reports. So if you dig into this data a little bit further, as we'll see, what the data actually shows that only 1 in 10 leaders were perceived as being effective in recognizing their people for positive safety behaviors. So I don't know about you, but we found this information really interesting. So we thought, okay, well, that's the aggregate data set. How does, say, something like an industry breakdown impact on this? Surely different industries would be better at it than others. So we dug a little bit deeper. We had a look at agriculture, industrial services, manufacturing, mining, oil and gas, and utilities. And what we found, again, the same trend, although at slightly different levels across those industries, recognizing again came out as by far one of the most significant opportunity areas across all of those competencies. So then we thought, okay, well, maybe it's based on company tenure. Maybe people are more sensitive to recognition when they're here for longer or shorter times. Maybe how long someone is in the business has an impact. But again, what we found is that it didn't seem to matter whether you're 1 year or 10 years plus. Recognizing people still felt like they weren't being recognized for their positive safety behaviors and positive safety contributions. Then we had a look at breakdown based on role. Again, consistently across the board from a competency perspective, recognizing was the biggest area of opportunity. But if you dig into this data a little bit closer, what you can actually see is that the frontline workers felt the least recognized out of everyone. And as people went up and got into higher roles, that they felt more and more recognized, although it's still not a particular area of strength in this space. Don't know what your experiences are, but certainly my experiences are that your frontline worker is typically being looked after by someone who's been a really good operator that's come off the tools and now is running a part of your business, and they often haven't been given the tools and the skills and the capability to effectively be safety leaders in the field. So it's not surprising to me that recognizing would be experienced at least at the frontline workers. Generally, as we see leaders I guess grow up the ranks and get more experience, they get better exposure to skills and training, and therefore can increase those skills in regards to that. So we can see the data is all pointing to recognizing being a serious gap in safety leadership capability across the organizations that we've worked with. To add a little bit more detail to this, not only was recognizing and rewarding employees for high safety performance lower than the rest, it was actually rated at a level that would have a significant functional impact on culture. So that's 28% in the red zone. They recognized that the 28 people in the red zone said that they were recognized not at all to a little extent at most. So that's a core of your workforce is saying either don't get recognized for positive safety behaviors, or if it is, it's a very little bit at most. And this again plays through to some of the more recent research we've run in our Driving a Positive Safety Culture resource. So again, all these resources are downloadable at centres.com.au/insights. But what this refers to is that in organizational cultures that operate in the more negative space, so the counterproductive and public compliance levels of maturity, one of the major challenges those organizations are facing is highlighted here in red: employee safety performance. So employee safety performance is indicating that a good chunk of your workforce here doesn't feel like that they are positively recognized for positive safety contributions. And you see this play out all the time. You know, I can do the job 99% of the time safely, I can make safe choices, but if something goes wrong, everything comes raining down on me. So people get that really unhelpful red zone attitude towards safety because they don't feel like they're recognized, or they don't feel they're appreciated for the positive safety efforts that they put in. So some pretty compelling data there, we think, to get you and your organization thinking about how we go out and reward positive safety behaviors. So why are we so ineffective at recognizing safety behaviors, and what are some of the common pitfalls that we make as leaders and as organizations in effectively recognizing positive safety contributions? So there's a bunch of data we can pull on here. We're going to look at some of these items at high level, and we can unpack them maybe at another date in more detail if we need to. But some of the high level things to consider are recognition programs that are tied to KPIs and not linked to company values and vision. So this is one of the most significant common pitfalls. So think about what your organization is KPI'd around. It's probably KPI'd around particular production outcomes, particular performance outcomes, particular commercial outcomes. Maybe it's tons out of the ground, maybe it's getting jobs done on time. Your KPIs are generally tied to KPIs that are based on getting the job done, or potentially production over safety. Often the mistake that we see organizations make is if they do then tie a KPI to safety, it's often tied to the thing that they are most obliged or obligated to measure. It's things like all injury frequency rates or lost time injury frequency rates. So what a lot of organizations will find that they're doing is that they're incentivizing production, and they're incentivizing just making sure that the number of lost time or all injury frequency rates doesn't go up. And this creates significant challenges for organizations when it comes to underreporting, people feeling like they can put forward ideas for improvement and discretionary effort. It also puts significant challenges of getting good data out of your workforce and out of your leaders, because the system is actually geared towards just getting the job done at any cost and potentially burying incidents that aren't as severe, so that we can't learn from them. So there's a bit of thought for a lot of companies to be put into how they set up their KPI programs. We'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. The next one is praise for praise sake. So there's a bunch of leaders out there who know that they should be saying thank you and recognizing positive behaviors and positive outcomes within their workforce, but they don't know how to. So they simply offer a word of thanks. Thanks, team, for getting the job done. Now, the challenge with just offering a general thanks is you might actually be thanking people for the very behaviors that you want to drive less of, or are unhelpful to getting people home safe. So as we're going to talk about in a moment, is praise is more powerful when it's specific, it's data-based, and it's based on the positive behaviors that you want to see. The next one, and this sort of ties a little bit for praise to praise sake, is recognizing outcomes rather than behaviors. So when we talk about this, we're talking about examples of people going above and beyond to get the job done, but as leaders not necessarily paying attention to how the job got done. So an example of this might be, imagine there's a person called John who supervises a team of workers operating machinery in a mineral processing plant. A vital piece of equipment has stopped working, and John is feeling the pressure from the management team to get the machinery back online ASAP. He sees his team working overtime. He sees his team work overtime and create a band-aid solution to get the equipment up and running. Even though John is aware that his team didn't complete a job hazard safety analysis for the task and actively chose to use tools for the task for which they were not designed, he praised their hard work and resourcefulness because they got the machinery up and running. So these sorts of issues play out all the time. We recognize, some really positive behavior in some regard. People going above and beyond for the organization to get things done and delivering on a result, but we don't pay attention to how we got to that particular result. And the challenge with this is, because we're rewarding maybe taking those shortcuts or those band-aid or making those band-aid type of decisions, we're reinforcing unhelpful behaviors. What we're also doing is we're setting ourselves up for some really challenging scenarios later on down the line. Because let's imagine the same thing happens again, but this time that group isn't as lucky, if there's such a thing, and something goes wrong and someone gets hurt. And it's found that there's breaches to process or the right tools for the job aren't getting used. Do you think we're going to respond differently if someone gets hurt? So the safety cynicism starts to be created. Well, you only care about safety when something goes wrong. As long as you don't hear about it and we get the job done, well, everything's all good. So you can see how these dynamics start to play out. The next one is a one-size-fits-all approach. So many leaders, again, they know they need to recognize and reward their team, but they don't think about how they're doing that. So they don't think about how they can recognize people in a way that creates intrinsic motivation. They don't think about ways that they can reward people that they actually connect with, that has meaning to them personally. In some instances, the way we recognize people can lead to them being embarrassed or shying away from that praise in the future. On the flip side, we'll often then see a bit of a carrot and stick approach. So we'll praise for this, we'll punish for this, but we're not, again, thinking about the process steps that come into play. So let's unpack those in just a moment, but I've got a quick poll for you all. So, and I'll ask James to whack this up on the screen for us. So which of the common pitfalls do you think represent the biggest opportunity areas for your business? Do you think recognition programs tied to KPIs is the opportunity area? Praise for praise sake is the opportunity area? Recognizing outcomes rather than behaviors is the opportunity area, or a one-size-fits-all approach? What do you think the biggest opportunity for your organization is? Great. So some really strong results coming through for recognizing programs tied to KPIs and recognizing outcomes rather than behaviors. And they are very closely linked, absolutely. So James, we might close that poll out. Great. So it seems like the biggest areas of opportunity identified by our listeners today are recognizing programs tied to KPIs, so 34%, and 51% saying recognizing outcomes rather than behaviors. And these are very common challenges that we see across organizations. So what can we start to do about them, and what does good potentially look like? So some considerations to think about as we pull into this next piece. So firstly, it's about thinking about what do we want to recognize to create the type of culture that we want to achieve. So looking at opportunities to link recognition to company vision, values, and objectives is one of the things that we can do to start to drive positive safety behaviors. As we'll talk about in a moment, learning what motivates your people is very powerful. Giving your leaders the skills to build recognition skills, we'll talk about that in a moment as well, but what does it look like to actually do that effectively? And then finally, finding ways to integrate recognition to existing workflow and practices. They're all very powerful ways that we can start to shift the conversation around reward and recognition. And again, the goal of reward and recognition is to have people become more intrinsically motivated to engage in the positive safety behaviours without having to have leaders constantly intervene. So we'll jump in firstly by looking at linking recognition to company vision, values, and objectives. So we're just sharing this on the screen as an example. This is how we do it at Centus, but it's just a bit of food for thought for the listeners here. So what are the values within your business, and what are the behaviours that are linked to those values? There's an opportunity, if you are very clear about your vision and your values and your objectives, that you can promote those actively through a reward and recognition process. The way that we've seen it work really well, and we've stolen some of these ideas from our clients and from different areas and applied them ourselves for sure, is that by focusing on these types of behaviors, you're not necessarily focusing on what gets done all the time, but in fact how it gets done. And this is a great opportunity for not only leaders to recognize team members, but for peers to recognize peers. So we can actually hold up the high performers in the organization and say, look, this is what it looks like in our example to own it, or to seek mastery, or to show that we care. So really powerful reward and recognition schemes can be tied to the types of values and behaviors that we want to see. And look, there's a bit of subjectivity in there. It's people's interpretation of what those look like, but it's about having the conversation. What does it look like to own it at Centus, for example? What did this person do, and what can we all learn and share about that? The next one is about understanding what motivates people. So a little bit of neuroscience about what motivates people. Firstly, the brain interprets social threats and rewards much like physical pain and pleasure. So understanding that how we recognize people in a public setting can potentially trigger a threat or a reward response within people. But positively recognizing people starts to build those positive reward systems within brains. So little bits of recognition regularly get the good positive reward systems going. And that sets you up. If there is a time that a corrective conversation needs to come into place, or a straight talk, then if you've built up your credit points or your reward points within people, you're much more likely to get a positive outcome. But on the flip side, if you want to energize and motivate people, consistent recognition, your brain loves it. It feeds into this next piece. As you recognize people, dopamine is released and people feel more motivated to achieve goals. One of the common questions we get coming through is, what is the role of, say, giving people a remuneration review or financial vouchers in terms of an effective reward and recognition scheme? What the research tells us, and what a lot of the neuroscience tells us, is that, look, there is a place for people being remunerated as a sign of appreciation. So a study by Glassdoor recently revealed that 75% of employees consider a pay rise a form of appreciation. However, what we find is, once people feel like they're remunerated fairly for their job, the impact of financial and material gifts is quite short term. So it triggers those serotonin and dopamine dumps for a short period, but you kind of need to keep on giving them out in order to continue to get that positive effect. So it is very much worthwhile thinking about, if you're going to go down that track, are you prepared to keep doing it? And of course, what are you going to recognize based on? If we feed into this next item, the default state of the brain is to deepen our social connection. We thrive in social groups. What a lot of research is actually pointing to is that that because people have a deep desire to be connected to one another, regular positive interaction with leaders, regular positive interaction with peers, goals or group goals or rewards that are based on team incentives, where people get to form deeper social connections and deeper commitment and cooperation with each other are just as impactful, if not more impactful, than the constant handing out of financial gifts. So I guess what we're saying here is, if you go down the commercial route for, we're going to give you X amount of dollars for achieving a particular goal, you can do that. However, you need to be very careful about what you are recognizing. And if you recognize the wrong thing, you could actually be driving the behaviors you don't want to see more of. So, we've seen it many times where, we'll give out a Waco fridge freezer to everyone on site if we can get 100 days injury frequency, lost time injury frequency free. I certainly wouldn't want to be the person getting injured on the second last day there and stopping everyone getting that fridge freezer. So thinking very carefully if you are going to give commercial rewards as an incentive or to performance is critical. But then being aware that if we do that, you got to kind of keep it up in order for it to continue to be effective. So in fact, a much more useful way of doing that is to look at the social context, look at team goals, look at opportunities for teams to get together and create that social connection and sense of community. But then to the next one, look at smaller acts of generosity, look at smaller bits of positive reward and recognition that can keep people tapping along in the right direction. So it doesn't, the brain doesn't necessarily recognize the difference all the time of a $100 gift voucher versus, a leader giving them effective positive recognition on the way that a job was done. So consistent positive recognition from leaders can be just as effective and possibly even more effective than focusing primarily on financial or commercial outcomes. What deepens your ability to effectively reward and recognize your team is to actually understand what is it that really motivates and drives this particular person. So what is it with this particular person that they are most likely to respond to? So some people are looking to learn new skills. So a bit of recognition that says, hey, you've done this job really well. I'm going to give you an opportunity to have an exposure to another part of the business. That can be seen just as positively or more positively than, again, those commercial bits of recognition. Attending learning and development is a real motivator for some. For some, it's about taking on additional responsibility within the team. So from a social brain perspective, they can give a sense of status and feel a sense of a greater input within the team, which is a huge motivator for others. For some, it's about taking on tasks that enable them to again, take on greater roles and responsibility within the team and to understand more broadly within the team. And the way that you can, so I guess looking at really understanding what makes my person tick. Are they a career person? Are they an L&D person? Are they a team-based social kind of person? And tailoring some of my ways that I reward and recognize them based on that can be really, really important. I guess another really important piece, we're going to talk about this, is to be constantly listening to our people. So actually taking the time to stop and listen and ask questions, whether it's through one-to-one bits of feedback. So we do start, stop, continue sessions at Centus, or whether it's through pulse surveys, letting people feel that they are heard and then helping them feel like they've contributed to the business can also be another part of that recognition as well. And as I mentioned earlier, promote social bonds. So again, looking at ways to maybe look at team-based incentives. So if we achieve this particular objective, we're going to go out to a nice lunch together, or we're going to have a barbecue, or we're going to do something together, is often a really powerful way of not only recognizing strong performance, but bringing a team together as a whole. The next tool that we referred to was about building recognition skills. So as we've mentioned, in order for recognition to be effectively, it's not a one-time set and forget. In fact, leaders need to be constantly going out and hunting the good stuff, as we often talk about. And this is particularly true when it comes to safety, because in a lot of organizations, the brand of safety is so damaged because, as we've seen through the data, I don't feel recognized for when I put positive contributions in. However, if something goes wrong, well, I hear all about it. So for a lot of us, we've got to be thinking about really deliberately going out and looking for the good things that people are doing and effectively recognizing those positive safety behaviors. Again, what the science tells us is that if we recognize an effective safety behavior, because those chemicals will be released within our brain, it triggers the reward system and we actually burn more neural pathways within our brain, and you create better habits within the people that you lead. So a couple of the skills that we'll often teach leaders are simple skills around tokens and attributions. So a token is a unit of recognition or acknowledgement, or an attribution is an attribution is an explanation of cause and effect. So we'll cover off quickly on tokens first of all. So tokens don't have to be particularly long-winded, but it does help if they tick at least some, if not a few of these boxes that we list. Firstly, if you're going to give someone a bit of recognition or acknowledgement, it needs to be genuine and honest. If people don't feel or don't see the connection between the bit of recognition and what they've done, very quickly their lie detectors, their internal lie detectors go off. So a fake token is in fact worse than no token at all. So if you can't make it genuine and honest, we'd say don't bother. And this comes a little bit back to that tokens for that recognition for recognition's sake we spoke about. What makes tokens more effective is make them data-based. So if you can link them back to a particular behavior that a person engaged in, then that makes it even stronger. So for example, hey, I noticed that you got that job done safely and efficiently, and I know you got it done safely because I read your your pre-start, or I read your documentation, and you very effectively mapped out the risks and the controls that need to be considered. It's worth considering the person that you're talking to as to whether you make those public or private in terms of that acknowledgement and recognition. Some of your team members will thrive on being recognized in front of the group. Others would rather not be recognized at all. So again, knowing your people and knowing what works best for them makes these more effective as a leader. The next one is third-party tokens. So third-party tokens refers to making a comment that maybe passing on a comment that you heard from another team member or another leader. So Jody, I was speaking to Jim up at the site, and he said the way you set up that exclusion zone up there was perfect, and it was it should be showcased for other parts of the business to look like. Awesome job. So not only are you recognizing Jody for the way she set that particular job up, but you're recognizing that someone else has seen her positive behavior as well. And the last one is time. As a leader, giving your people time is one of the most effective tokens that you can give. And when I'm talking about giving time, I'm not talking about just sitting in a room with them half distracted, looking at your phone or plugging away at emails while they're there, but genuinely spending time talking to them, getting to know them, asking them questions and getting their input. It's a huge relationship builder, and it's a huge token for your team. So again, these things might feel like they're going to take a bunch of extra time. However, they're not meant to be long-winded. They're meant to be frequent and clear, but they don't have to take a lot of time. And in fact, short and sharp is often the best. That small investment of time to reinforce those positive behaviors are of course aimed at you not having to spend time fix up problems later on down the track. To build on the idea of tokens, you can turn a token into a contribution. You can into an attribution. And the way you turn a token into an attribution is through providing personal or internal causes for that great result, or versus a situational or external causes. So what we're trying to basically say is we're trying to link the positive outcome or behavior that the person did to the type of person that they are. And you do that through the use of language such as this. Because type of people we are, you are, as a result of or due to the choices we made. So for example, you might get up in front of or you might talk to a particular team member. You might say, look, the way you set up this exclusion zone is an excellent reflection of your commitment to safety. And because of that, you're a role model to your peers. So you're looking at tying what it is you're recognizing to something that is personal about them. So as much as possible, saying, I'll give you another example here. You can use this at the team level. This team has been responding to the challenges so well because of the flexibility and collaboration you have shown in the face of adversity. I believe this reflects the types of people we are. So what type of people are we? We're flexible and we collaborate and we can adapt to adversity. So reinforcing those attitudes or those frames within the people that we lead. The next tool that you've got here is to find ways to integrate recognition into existing workflows and practices. So again, it's not about adding a bunch of extra time, but it's looking at, well, what have we currently got in place that we can enhance through the application of some of these recognizing skills. So examples might be, you could potentially add a section to the start of your pre-start meeting to say wins from yesterday. Has anyone got any wins from yesterday? And they might be team wins, but they might also be individual wins. So facilitating the team to focus on the positive results that they got on that particular day. And of course, putting a positive spin on that. You can integrate it into other processes such as your safety interactions or your in-field conversations as leaders. So one of the big things we talk to our leaders that we work with on is, how do you go out there and hunt the good stuff? So much of the time we feel like the objective of going out there is to find things that aren't working and to correct them. But how many positive things do you walk past as you're out there in the field? So actively going out there and I like looking for good things and taking the time to have a conversation with that person in a meaningful way about the good thing and why they did in that particular way and what learnings we can take away from that. And then if we go back to that earlier example, again, building systems in that enable people to recognize exceptional performance of peers or leaders or teammates. So things like having a values-based award or a behaviours-based award or a safety initiative-based award, where people can go out of their way to say, I saw the efforts of that particular person and they've got a place and a platform to promote the positive behaviours of that person is really, really important. Our experience with implementing these things is people feel awkward about it at the start. What you mean? I'm supposed to give people positive recognition, but once you get used to it, and once your workforce gets past the initial potentially mistrust that they may feel when you go up to them and you give them some positive feedback, that positive recognition breeds more positive recognition, and before you know it, you can start to have a culture where people are actively going out and hunting the good stuff and sharing learnings, and you're creating that increased sense of psychological safety and trust. So we've got 6 steps here at a high level for you to consider in building recognizing ability. So firstly, be clear. What are the positive safety behaviors that you want to see from your people? And if we can link them to your values, then that's fantastic. But be clear with the types of behaviors you want to see more of. Make a list of the types of reward and recognition available. We've given you an example here. Look at how you can link those reward and recognition strategies to motivation drivers and help people feel incentivized and energized towards the goals that you've set. Number 3 is, again, spend time with your team in the field. Actively look for the wins in there and promote those. Number 4 is, when you observe a positive behavior, don't just walk past it. Stop and recognize it, but think about what sort of recognition would work best for that particular person. Number 5 is take action to recognize the behavior as soon as possible. You're much better off walking up, recognizing a positive safety behavior when it happens in the moment in an appropriate way than leaving it for a month until it's gone off a boil. So again, immediate is better. And lastly, remember people have a pretty good lie detector within their brain. So be genuine with it. You can make a mess of it in some ways. You can be awkward, you can be funny, but as long as people can see that you're genuine in the way that you're showing your recognition, it does what it's supposed to do. So that's our summary of some of the tools that you can tap into to consider building reward and recognition skills and processes within your organization. We referred to some research throughout this particular webinar. The research is on the screen here, so it's, you can download these through our website, through the Driving a Positive Safety Culture ebook and also the State of Safety Leadership ebook. They're both there for you to download. I will invite any questions now, and I've got a couple coming through, which I'll respond to in just a moment, but if anyone else would like to add their questions, that'd be great. There's a couple of other bits of housekeeping here. We're continuing on our intensive leadership program. So we've filled the last 4 cohorts of this. So for those of you who aren't familiar with this program, it's 6 90-minute webinars that you can attend to build your safety leadership capability in your organization. So you attend that with bunch of leaders from across a bunch of other organizations, and you get to discuss really meaty topics such as defining the culture you want to see, building a culture based on trust, leadership frames, challenging people to think differently, hunting the good stuff, and building a plan for cultural change. So the feedback from that program has been exceptional. And some of the benefits are not only the quality of the program and the learnings you take away, but the fact that you get to build a professional network and hear some of the exceptional work that your peers are doing. So invite you to jump on board. James, I'll ask you to whack the poll on the screen. If anyone is interested in that, just click yes, and we will give you an opportunity to, one of our team will be in contact to see if you want to look a little bit further into that. Yeah, right. Okay, so I've got some great questions coming through on the screen. I'll close that poll out. Just another little offer we've got on the screen as well. You can, we've taken all of our cognitive behavioral based safety programs online. So you can actually jump online and experience that for a short period of time complimentary. We know that for some people, there is a barrier to jumping online to do these programs. We use a flipped classroom approach through our online offering. So what that refers to is you do some of the learning by our interactive online learning program, but then we've got application sessions that come off the back of that, which help to solidify the learning and apply the learning. I'll ask James to put the poll up for this. If anyone is interested in registering to be to get access to a free 30-day trial, just let us know. Just as that's happening, I'm going to respond to a question here from David Tui. So what is said here is I've been asked by our board to come up with a better way to look at the executive bonus incentive scheme around safety rather than the old lead indicators. Great. Well, I'm going to start by saying, David, what an awesome opportunity. Some of the biggest challenges that we face when it comes to building reward and recognition into businesses and shifting the focus away from lag indicators to lead indicators is shifting the board, because it's often the board cares most about the lost time injury frequency rate. So that's an awesome thing. So David, a book I can push you to is a book called The 4 Disciplines of Execution. I've mentioned this before. It's a great one on setting lead and lag indicators. But the way that we talk about lead and lag indicators at Centus is you can think about it as, say, positive and negative. Now, negative are the types of indicators that we want to trend down. So these are the things that should go down. Typically, they're your lost time injury frequency rates, your all injury frequency rates, your costs associated with it. Like they're all things that we want to trend down. Now, the challenge with that is it's all focusing on stuff that's already happened. So it's all stuff that's in the past, and it's not particularly empowering. It doesn't provide a good description of the positive things that people need to do in order to reduce the number of people that get hurt. It just focuses on that number needs to go down. So it's not a particularly effective way of driving positive safety behaviors within an organization. So what we challenge you to think about when you're looking at things like setting KPIs is, what are the positive behaviors? What are the things, if we did more of them, should go up, and if that number went up, would have an impact on those things at the back end. So, and this is where understanding where your culture is at can become really useful. If you've got a culture that's got huge amounts of fear and mistrust and you're getting underreporting results, then your KPI for your leaders may be a target around a number of in-field interactions with a number of positive bits of a number of good catches that come out of those, for example. So I guess what you're looking at there, David, is looking at, well, what are the positive behaviors that leaders can engage in that we believe are going to have the biggest impact on the lag indicator? Maybe for your finance team, it's how often they went through the consultation process with the workforce before they procured new pieces of equipment, if that's a particular challenge. For your operational leaders, perhaps it's the amount of time they spent out in the field on the floor, and you might measure that by time as opposed to number of actual walks. It might be, again, the effective implementation of a reward and recognition scheme within their team with a number of peer bits of recognition coming up from the workforce. It might be also focusing on some things that seem counterintuitive, such as the number of near misses that are reported going up, or it might be the number of positive safety initiatives promoted or raised up from the workforce. So again, some of it's about thinking about, well, what's the lag indicator we're going to have to shift, because we're not ever going to get away from that. But thinking about, well, what are the behaviors if we did more of, we hypothesize would have that impact, and that becomes, I guess, the tricky part for a number of organizations. So David, if you want to chat about that more, let me know, and happy to link in with you to have a conversation. Just having a look at what other ones we've had come through. In the transport industry, if a driver has been working safely, such as loading their truck with freight, what would be a good recognition, considering most drivers do not want to do more training? Look, so it might be about so again, it's about understanding what your workforce is about. If they don't want to do more training, perhaps it's about getting them together for a social event where they can connect with their colleagues. If they're alone in their cab a lot, maybe a social event that they can all work to together could be something that could work really well. But remember, sometimes it's not about actually giving a tangible reward. Sometimes it's about being actively out there in the field. If you see someone load up their truck with freight well, recognize it, go over there, have a conversation with them about it, talk to them about the benefits of what they've done. If someone's innovated in the way that they've done it and they're doing it particularly safely or particularly effectively, is there a way that you can take the learnings from them and promote those across the business as a way of getting additional recognition? So I guess it's about, again, understanding your workforce and getting a little bit creative about what matters to them and what is the most meaningful to them. All right, any other questions that anyone has? I think that's most of them for now. If I refer back to the question sheet, so we had the one from Mari from Energy Queensland about potentially rewarding negative behaviours if we focus on KPIs. Completely agree. So the big challenge here is we don't necessarily want to focus for our workforces on the lost time injury frequency rate. We want to look at the positive behaviours and activities that they can engage in, which will mean that we get that as a result. So it's about inputs versus outputs. We've got another one here. How do we destigmatize safety recognitions and rewards, and move management from being an infighter opportunity to, or pushing safety rewards to being positive and proactive? So again, I think encouraging leaders that it's about just going out and just changing the lens a little bit. You don't have to make a big song and dance about it. It doesn't always have to be connected to some sort of big financial reward or something tangible. Going out there and giving a meaningful token or attribution, or or just spending that time with your workforce can be as effective as anything. And then if I go through, I think I've addressed the one from Michael about the lower money one. Yeah, so I think we've covered off most of the questions that have come through, but of course, feel free to get in contact with me via email should you like to ask any more detail. We've got some more webinars coming up. So the next webinar we've got coming up will be on Wednesday, the 16th of September. It's about building resilience in a COVID world of work. So as we adjust to this new normal, what are the tools and resources we can equip our people with to move through this challenging time? So a great webinar, and I will be doing things like exploring the benefits of resilience, understanding a model of resilience, and looking at practical strategies to improve resilience and well-being in the workplace. So again, thank you all for your time. I appreciate the fact that there's so many of you out there that want to improve this incredibly important skill of reward and recognition within your workforce. And as always, feel free to reach out to me via email or LinkedIn or whatever you like if you'd like to discuss this in any more detail. Thanks, and stay safe.